Next week, 480 Platoon on 24-hour standby as reinforcements race to get ready for the Falklands, with special training designed, says one of their instructors, to get rid of their gun shyness. And the story of the platoon and their regiment is told in this BBC book by Frank Hilton, The Paras, on sale at booksellers. BBC Two is just starting its series which looks at A Gentle Way with Cancer. Here on BBC One in 25 minutes, Esther Ranson appeals on behalf of the Ethiopian famine victims. That's followed at 9:30 by the Richard Dimbleby lecture given this year by Sir Peter Parker. First, it's time for the 9 o'clock news with Michael Buerk.
Three Russians expelled from Britain tonight for spying. Thousands of peace campaigners gather in what they call Nuclear Valley, while in Berlin Mr. Heseltine says our missiles keep the Soviets behind the wall. More than 7,000 shipyard workers will lose their jobs. Björn Borg loses his last big match. And on both sides of the world, little girls steal the show. Good evening. The British government tonight ordered the expulsion of 3 Russians, apparently for spying. 2 of them are diplomats, the third operates as a journalist. All 3 are being expelled for activities incompatible with their status, a diplomatic nicety generally assumed to mean espionage. The most senior of the 3 is Colonel Gennady Primakov on the left, the assistant air attaché at the Soviet embassy. He's been given 7 days to leave. Sergei Ivanov, a second secretary, is presently out of the country and won't be allowed to return. The third man, Igor Titov, describes himself as London correspondent for a Soviet foreign policy magazine. He too has been given a week to get out of the country. Here's our diplomatic correspondent, Keith Graves.
5 Soviet citizens have now been expelled in as many months. The Foreign Office doesn't actually use the word spy. They're sent packing for indulging in activities incompatible with their status, a euphemism for spying. Whitehall is being particularly tight-lipped about just what those activities were, though I understand they have nothing to do with the spate of recent spy cases, involving, amongst other places, the top-secret government communications centre at Cheltenham. It is perhaps no coincidence that since the revelations of the past year about just how leaky our secret intelligence community has been, followed by outrage from Mrs. Thatcher and an order to her intelligence chiefs to get their act together, there's been this relatively steady stream of expulsions. First came Captain Anatoly Zotov, the Soviet naval attaché ordered out before Christmas. A jovial extrovert and a popular figure on the London diplomatic circuit, he'd been trying to recruit British service personnel he met in the course of his official duties. In January, Captain Vladimir Chernov, a translator with the International Wheat Council, got his marching orders. It's still not clear what he'd been up to. Colonel Primakov, the most senior on paper at least of tonight's expulsions, has been here since June 1980, accompanied by his wife. In his capacity as assistant air attaché, he's been on occasional visitor to official RAF functions and displays. Sergei Ivanov, a second secretary at the Soviet embassy, came here in 1981, again with his wife. His diplomatic title would appear to be a cover for an officer in the KGB. Igor Titov, who lives with his wife and 2 young children in West London, describes himself as a correspondent for New Times, a Soviet political magazine. He's worked here before for 5 years in the 70s, and he came back just a year ago. His English is almost perfect, and unlike the 2 diplomats, he's much freer to travel around the country. Last year, for example, he attended the major political party conferences. Tonight, sitting with his wife and children in his flat, he said that the spy allegations were outrageous nonsense.
Well, I think it's absolutely ridiculous. Well, it came to me absolutely unexpected. I really cannot know what is it about.
The Foreign Office say that you've been engaging in unacceptable activities.
I'm absolutely not. I've been a journalist here. I've been here quite a lot.
Have you done any spying for your government?
Absolutely not.
Have you done any spying for anybody else?
Absolutely not.
What are you going to do about these charges?
Well, we don't have any right to appeal against the decision of the Foreign Office. So, well, I'm actually living.
Well, Mr. Titoff added that if Mrs. Thatcher wants to indulge in what he called provocation, that's what she'll get, he said, and he's probably right. If past form is anything to go by, 2 British diplomats will soon be told to leave Moscow by the Kremlin. None of those accused of spying tonight will be replaced in London. Since the mass expulsion of Russians by the British government in 1971, the ceiling of Russians allowed to work here is lowered each time one is ordered out. In future there'll be 43 Russian diplomats and 105 civilians allowed to base themselves here. And intelligence sources reckon that at least 60% of those are involved in intelligence work to a greater or lesser degree.
Thousands of demonstrators are gathering tonight for what they say will be one of the biggest peace protests Britain's ever seen. The campaign for nuclear disarmament is hoping as many as 40,000 people will join in an Easter demonstration along what they call Nuclear Valley. The protest began today with blockades of 2 sites, Greenham Common, where cruise missiles will be deployed later this year, and the Royal Ordnance Factory at Burfield, where most of Britain's nuclear weapons are made. Tomorrow, CND wants to link the two with a 14-mile human chain that will also take in the atomic weapons research establishment at Aldermaston. Mrs. Thatcher has already reacted sharply to the demonstration. They'd be better off linking arms round the Berlin Wall, she said. Peter Gould reports from Berkshire.
6 a.m. and the blockade begins at Burfield as demonstrators sit in the roadway and sing peace songs, a dawn chorus which helped one policeman stay warm. The police were on hand to ensure that the workers at the factory, which assembles nuclear warheads, were able to enter the premises freely.
I think it's a diabolical liberty that one can't get to work when one wants to. So, you know, what reason are you for stopping a person going to work?
The demonstrators claimed that some employees did stay away today, but others were clearly determined to report for work as usual, regardless of the obstacles in their path. And for those arriving on foot, quiet words of advice from the police.
It's up to you. You want to go to work, it doesn't matter for you, but my advice would be to go in one at a time, and if there's too much aggravation, turn round, walk out, go home.
You prefer me not to earn money just because you're not earning money? Some of us want to earn our money.
14 miles away at Greenham Common, a similar blockade was underway, with members of the Women's Peace Camp staging their now familiar demonstration outside all 7 of the entrances to the American base. By tomorrow, thousands more are expected to join them.
The object is not just to mass the numbers, but really to show people we have cruise missiles here, we have the research centre at Aldermaston, and we have the bomb factory. And this is what I call Nuclear Valley. And we're warning people in this country that with the first strike weapons and the first use weapons coming, that this country is drifting towards nuclear war.
As the demonstrators gathered today, police on horseback were ready to control the growing crowds. So far, however, there have been no arrests, although some protesters have been carried away to allow vehicles in and out of the base. And tonight, hundreds more CND supporters have been converging on Greenham Common, in readiness for tomorrow's human chain.